Mrs. Dalloway, novel by Virginia Woolf published in 1925. It examines one day in the life of Clarissa Dalloway, an upper-class Londoner married to a Member of Parliament. Mrs. Dalloway is essentially plotless. What action there is takes place mainly in the character's consciousness. The novel addresses the nature of time in personal experience through multiple interwoven stories, particularly that of Clarissa as she prepares for and hosts a party, and that of the mentally damaged war veteran Septimus Warren Smith. The two characters can be seen as foils for each other. The novel's narration is third-person omniscient, but it changes its focus throughout. The narrative begins and ends with Clarissa as it details a day in her life. Clarissa is a seemingly disillusioned socialite whose mood fluctuates. At some moments she seems delighted, at others she seems depressed. Her overall effect suggests suppressed symptoms of depression. Mrs. Dalloway begins with Clarissa's preparatory errand to buy flowers. Unexpected events occur, a car emits an explosive noise and a plane writes in the sky, and incite different reactions in different people. Soon after she returns home, her former lover Peter arrives. The two converse, and it becomes clear that they still have strong feelings for each other. In a moment of shared vulnerability, Peter asks Clarissa if she is happy. Before Clarissa can answer, her daughter, Elizabeth, interrupts them. Perspectives switch, and the narrator inhabits Septimus Warren Smith, a World War I veteran suffering from shell shock, what today would likely be identified as post-traumatic stress disorder. He is waiting with his wife, Lucrezia, to see a psychiatrist named Sir William Bradshaw. The reader is informed that Septimus has been suffering greatly since returning from the war, and his suffering is something the other characters are unable to grasp. The perspective shifts to Richard, Clarissa's husband. In a fit of passion, Richard wants to run home and tell Clarissa he loves her. However, he finds himself unable to do more than give her flowers. Clarissa acknowledges that she respects the gulf between herself and Richard, as it gives both of them freedom and independence while also relieving them of paying attention to certain aspects of life. The novel's perspective shifts back to Septimus, who has been told that he is to be taken to a psychiatric hospital. Septimus would rather die than see himself inside such a place, so he throws himself out of a window and becomes impaled on a fence. The narration then switches to Clarissa's perspective again, this time during her party. She is primarily concerned with entertaining her guests, some of whom are very esteemed. Sir William Bradshaw arrives with his wife, who announces that Septimus has killed himself. Clarissa, though at first annoyed that Mrs. Bradshaw would discuss such a topic at a party, is soon ruminating on Septimus's situation. In a small room, by herself, she identifies with how overwhelmed Septimus must have felt. She respects him for choosing death over compromising the integrity of his soul by allowing it to be confined. In light of what he did to preserve his soul, she feels ashamed of the ways she has compromised her own soul in order to go on living. Thus chastened, she returns to the party as it is winding down. The novel is about the life and personality of Mrs. Clarissa Dalloway. She affects others and is herself affected by others. The whole story of the novel begins and ends within a single day of June, the day when she is giving a party in the evening. But her contacts with various people and the memories that they evoke in her and in others, her life story from her girlhood to her present age of 50 is gradually unfolding. Through her stream of consciousness and various associated thoughts with many persons, we perceive her at the critical moments in her life. The main attention is paid to her love experiences. She loved Peter Walsh, still she loves him but is married to a rich man, MP Richard Dalloway. She had probably rejected his love due to his trait of possessiveness. He was not expected to allow her wife any spiritual privacy, but Richard Dalloway has provided her that. But is she happy in her attic room? Thus, her love life shows a tension between the rival claims of the self and social contacts. Post-World War I British society was very conservative and hierarchical, that means that social class was super important. Throughout Mrs. Dalloway, we see how deeply aware characters are of their social standing. Those in the upper class cherish their family history and often come from royalty or aristocracy. For those in the lower class, it is very difficult to move up in the world. As Woolf clearly indicates, British people were meant to admire the upper class and be very aware of their place in the social ladder. Notice that most of Clarissa's friends are of the same social status or higher. The Prime Minister even comes to her party. On the other hand, people like Ellie Henderson and Miss Kilman are loathsome to Clarissa in part because they're beneath her socially. And it's not just Clarissa, almost all of the characters are concerned with social status and class, either increasing it, holding onto it, or feeling inferior from it. Clarissa's party stirs up memories for many of the characters, and memories are constantly woven into the present-day thoughts of the characters. The past affects each character differently in Mrs. Dalloway. Certain memories are very keen, and much happier, for Clarissa, such as getting a kiss from Sally Seton. She cherishes these moments as the best of her life. For Peter, the past is mostly just painful. He still can't get over his love for Clarissa, and so he constantly returns to the summers at Bourton in order to make sense of what happened. For Septimus, memories are haunting and painful. He continues to hallucinate that he's seeing Evans get killed, and memories of the war dominate his mind. Though he struggles to see beauty, the present is constantly interrupted by gruesome visions of the past. Septimus, a complement of Mrs. Dalloway, illustrates, like Mrs. Dalloway, the conflict that exists between the privacy of self, which tries to keep the self inviolate, and the claims of society in the novel. He too, like her, wants to keep his spirit inviolate and is terrified when worldlings like Dr. Holmes and Dr. Bradshaw proceed towards him to dominate and to possess him, and in order to escape from it he jumps through the window of the hospital, where he is taken by force, and dies. The irrational, tormented and alienated aspects of Mrs. Dalloway's spirit are represented in him. Dr. Holmes and Dr. Bradshaw are symbols of human nature, as it were. As such they want Septimus to project himself and to do as the people in the world and life normally act and behave. Mrs. Dalloway gives a picture of the modern world with its destructive forces of class struggle, economic insecurity and war. The theme of the novel is the serious indictment of society. According to Blackstone, it is a serious indictment of society that Virginia Woolf is building up, slowly, from the beginning, by cross-references and allusions, now directly, now ironically, now with the undertones of pity and terror. This parade of civilization and culture, which can gladden the heart of Clarissa Dalloway because it is life and because she does not look below the surfaces, what does it hide? The novel is rather a portrait of Mrs. Dalloway's society than of the lady herself. The immaterial of which is life, in London, the British ruling class. And this life is brought in the character of Clarissa Dalloway. The way in which she is characteristic and what it characterizes can be shown from the opening section in which she walks from her house in Westminster to buy flowers in Bond Street. It becomes clear that her life is not much more than vivacity, and that the world she loves and builds around herself is a tissue of shallow impressions and fantasies. The divine vitality which she declares she adores is manifested in cabs passing, sandwich man shuffling and swinging, brass bands and barrel organs, that is in the mere sensations of nose and movement and excitement. Using the principal technique of her works, the stream of consciousness, Virginia Woolf tries to imprint the process of thinking of her characters, to reproduce their slightest feelings, thoughts, emotions. It stands to reason that the writer is not interested in the real world. What she is really interested in is the interpretation of the real world in the consciousness and subconsciousness. She dismisses the real world with its problems and leaves for a better world, a world of feelings and emotional experience, rich associations and changeable senses. Virginia Woolf makes a reader enter the character's inner world, but not study the reasons that made the character do in this or that way. That reason results in the impressionistic manner of image and style. There is no clear form, but the text abounds in fragmentary details and features.